Now come to very important part, the scenario part, how on-premises AD and Azure AD work together. So let me open one scenario first. So first is Azure AD hybrid scenario. So typically, you have on-premises environment up and running, and this is your Azure AD. So end of the day, it's our responsibility to integrate on-premises with Azure AD first. So we need a utility called Azure AD Connect. Old days, we use a utility called directory synchronization. The big difference between directory synchronization and Azure AD Connect is Azure AD Connect comes with a password write back. First, I'll tell you what is Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect is a utility which sync all my on-premises users from on-premises user to Azure AD. This is the first initial way which we need to integrate on-premises AD to Azure AD. This is a sync service which run every 30 minutes, and there is a object account name is AAD underscore with a numeric number, unknown number. This is a user account which created in Azure AD, which is the owner of this sync service, which help us to start the sync service every 30 minutes, and it do a delta sync. First time it will be a full sync, and after that it will be a delta sync. Now, once you do the Azure AD Connect sync service, they ask you a couple of integration options. One is a password hash sync, and one of the option is called with ADFS. So we'll talk about that authentication scenarios as well in 5 minutes. This is first thing. Second thing is there's a concept called Azure VM as a domain controller. So this is another way Microsoft recommends. I'll take your questions separately, So I saw there is a question, I think. So there's a separate Microsoft concept is Azure VM as a domain controller. So why we need Azure VM as a domain controller? So this is very straightforward example. Azure VM as a AD server. Let me open the scenario. You have on-premises environment running, say USA. You have one data center region running in Europe, and you have a site-to-site connectivity. So why you need a domain controller in each location? At least 2 as a best practice, because you need a fast authentication. Same way, when we built another data center in Azure, say somewhere this is in, say, Australia, then you have a site-to-site connectivity between head office to Azure, and you have a couple of 100+ servers in Azure VM. So who will authenticate these Azure VMs? So if you don't have any local server here, then definitely this request goes to the head office, and it takes some time because we have a site-to-site connectivity. So every Azure VM is a part of a domain called abccorp.com. So definitely what we need as a typical scenario, what we are doing from last 20 years, we need a local AD server to authenticate locally. I hope it makes sense. So normally people get confused, this Azure VM as a AD and Azure Active Directory both are same. No, both are not same. This Azure VM as a AD is typically an on-prem AD. It's just a replica of an on-prem AD. This particular AD is not doing any authentication of a cloud server or cloud applications. So that Azure AD concept will be different. Make sense? So that's different thing. Now, so we know why we need Azure VM as a AD. So that it's just like a AD replica. So, and if we need a fast authentication in Azure VM, if you have huge number of servers as a design practice, 100+, we need one Azure VM as a domain controller as a best practice. That's called the planning part. So how we can do that Azure VM as a domain controller? So that steps are mentioned in that slide, but I'll explain in the architecture way. So typically we need site-to-site VPN connectivity, which is mentioned in the diagram. First thing. Second thing, when you create Azure VM, typically Azure VM is having own DNS, or you can say Azure DNS. So we need to change all my Azure VM pointing towards my on-prem DNS. That's a very basic step. Um, like like to join any machine with a domain, we need two things. One is connectivity, and second, the servers should talk to the right DNS. So the first step is connectivity and the custom DNS. So after that, I can join the machine. So create a one network, create a one storage, create one VM, general step. And finally, we need to make sure that configure DNS to point to the on-prem, this thing. So that's way I can join my any